All right, welcome everybody. This is Revenue Roadmap, where we talk about driving revenue and increasing profits in local businesses. I'm Anthony Karls, president of RocketClicks. Today I'm with Mr. James Patterson again. You guys are getting sick of seeing him, probably.
Probably.
But he's going to drop some paid media bombs on you. So we'll see how this goes. We're going to talk about inbound versus outbound paid media. What's the difference? How to think about this? How do they fit in the 5 stages of awareness? All of that kind of stuff. Before we do that, James, I got a question for you.
Okay.
This one's probably gonna hurt. Did you win in fantasy football this weekend?
Wow. That's a real setup because, so for all our listeners here, Tony's in the same league as me, so he knows quite well where the standings are at. Yes, week one can be tough, right? I came out of the draft feeling good, but didn't quite put all the right pieces together. I had 30 points on the bench, so let's be clear.
Trash talking from James. That's what I got.
Yeah.
Better watch out. I think he said you want to double the pot before we started, but that's okay. All right, real question. That one's not helpful. What habits or routines do you follow to stay on top of your game?
Yeah. Big part of my routine change really came around the COVID timeline. So obviously it messed up a lot of people's what they were doing previously. Decided I wanted to do a better job of staying in shape and kind of keeping my mind right through those avenues. So the gyms are closed and stuff like that. I started running more before work. Once all that kind of flipped around, you're able to go back to the gym and everything. I think it was kind of colder weather and stuff like that. So it was nice to still be able to get a run in, but obviously, outside, not so much an opportunity here living in Wisconsin. Over time, it evolved into kind of getting into lifting and stuff like that. So now it's really a big part of my routine. I think it's really helped a lot, just like mental clarity, both, lifting and doing some cardio and stuff like that can be really good just to kind of reflect, get reset for the day and, kind of bring all my energy ready to go right away when we're starting the day at work. So that's been a big routine for me that way. And recently I've been trying to do more reflection. So at the end of the day, kind of unwinding and stuff before bed, thinking about successes, thinking about opportunities, things like that. So I would attribute those kind of two elements as, key things in my routine that are helping me stay strong.
Nice. Awesome. Little physical, mental health opportunities. Those are good. Yep. All right, sir. So inbound and outbound paid media. So let's first off, what is inbound and what is outbound paid media? What's the difference?
Yep. So inbound media, think about it this way: it's people coming out and actually seeking out you. So a lot of times when we talk about platforms for inbound, we're talking really specifically around search. So people are actively searching for your product or your company or whatever kind of related to that would be. So they're coming towards you inwards. Outwards is the exact opposite. So people that generally may not be aware of your product or service or company. So coming out and kind of disrupting their flow online through different channels like social, programmatic, things like that. So that's really the key differences there.
Nice. So when where does inbound typically fall in the 5 stages of awareness? Generally, it's not always the rule. And what about outbound?
Yeah, so I mean, if you have a really mature, search strategy, you might be touching on, basically all of the different areas, but primarily most people are using search on the lowest funnel, so it's going to be most aware, product aware, potentially solution aware, but generally it's going to be the lowest there. So oftentimes most aware. So people that are, buy intent, they want to make a purchase for your product or your company right then and there, kind of a thing.
Yeah. So what are some examples of that? Like, what are some campaigns we run, and what are some examples of those?
Yep. So here on the B2C local team, we follow our first principles, which is basically a kind of a guideline that all of us on the different accounts look at paid strategy. So one of the things we do is segment out by intent. So one of the things that we like to do is do core campaigns, which are kind of the most general kind of version. So what are the most kind of general terms related to your business or service? So if it's a lawyer, think divorce lawyer, right? So simply just that term. And then we'll kind of go lower into the funnel through different variations there. So we'll usually have a buy core variation. So then, divorce lawyer near me. And then we'll have geo variations of that. So kind of adding another layer onto that. So divorce lawyer, maybe Green Bay, Wisconsin. And then ultimately most aware, right? divorce lawyer near me, Green Bay, Wisconsin. So putting that buy, core, and geo all in one place. So that's kind of the way that we look at search strategy to really dive into people that, either kind of fall within solution product or most aware buckets.
Yeah. And if we were to go up on search, how would that start looking?
Yep. So then that's going more in the informational side of things. So like again, the core bucket is kind of your hybrid of that, right? Like you're gonna not really gonna have people that are super aware, but they are looking for obviously your service specifically. So like unaware, maybe somebody that's looking for specific problems. So like I think we in our last podcast we talked about stretching. So like maybe a play as kind of like a problem aware type element on search would be like ways to improve my back pain, right? Getting a stretch ad for that could be a really good opportunity to ultimately bring somebody down in combination with your other campaigns to get them, aware of your service business and then ultimately convert with you.
Yeah. So alternatively, outbound. So where do these typically lie, and like what are some examples of that?
Yeah, so a lot of times outbound, I would say like the kind of introductory, channel for most folks is going to be generally social. So it's going to be your combination of Meta, TikTok, possibly Snapchat, depending on your audience, things like that. X, LinkedIn, obviously, if you depending on again your kind of your industry. Usually, social channels is a good starting place. I'd say with probably 80% of clients we work with, if they're on social, they're generally on Meta or TikTok.
Nice.
Yep. And I was just going to add some other examples then outside of social for outbound again would be programmatic. So that's going to be display, CTV, OTT. So again, think of really disruptive things. So CTV, OTT, somebody's watching, on-demand Food Network or something, right? They're catching up on a show they like and watching old seasons. Us kind of just disrupting that experience by getting one of our ads on there and placed, or we can bring it back to your fantasy football example, Tony. If you're on ESPN doing some frantic waiver wire research, you're clicking the ad to hear what the experts have to say for the best waiver wire pickups. That little ad that shows before the actual video, it's a pre-roll ad. You can get placements there too. Again, disrupting the person's kind of online experience to get in front of them.
Yeah. On the OTT side, those are typically the like I have a Samsung TV. I don't know how many channels there are. I think it's like 5,000. It feels like it anyway. Right now, what we keep bouncing back and forth between is Lucky Dog, which my girls love,
Okay.
and actually Joe Rogan's a really old show, Fear Factor. I've
Nice.
recently found that, and they stick and then Fear Factor 24/7 on that channel.
Yep.
But yeah, there's ads. There's ads in between where there's commercials, and it's decent space to buy stuff where there is audience, and it's usually really cheap. So, and typically an engaged audience.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, what else is good to consider here, inbound versus outbound, in terms of timing? When do we want to do each? Like, how do we think about it in relation to like a product that's pretty well known or service that's pretty well known,
Yep.
Versus a service that is less well known or newer? So how would we process, like, should we be doing inbound or outbound? How should we break this up?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we here on the B2C local team, we do have a roadmap that we follow. So, most businesses are going to generally start with paid search. I would say the one element where this maybe sometimes could be flexed is an industry or service that's kind of newer to the sphere. So, I know we've talked a lot about the stretch client that we have. I would say that absolutely falls within there, is that a lot of people are at this point unaware that these services exist, what problems they solve, and ultimately what brands exist in the space and things like that.
Yeah.
So that could be your kind of rare instance where it might actually make sense to be a little bit higher in the outbound methods versus more inbound. You're still always going to want to have the basics for the most part if you can, like a brand campaign to capture people that are getting educated through your outbound tactics. But in terms of a split, you may in those instances be a little bit heavier outbound, because it's ultimately a much better vessel in terms of educating and obviously driving awareness to your audiences. So it's a lot more difficult in a search ad to explain a lot of stuff, right? There's 30 characters in the headline, 90 characters in this thing. Most people are scrolling through there as fast as they absolutely can. So it's a lot more difficult to educate. Obviously, you have the landing page for that. that's why outbound tactics, especially for those newer industries, or if you're kind of disrupting, the category you play in, it can be more effective to really have your audience understand, what makes you different, what problems you solve, and things like that. So that's kind of the example where outbound would be the leader, perhaps in your allocation. Otherwise, in more mature, kind of established markets or industries, like a family lawyer type client, generally you're going to have some split of oftentimes the majority of your spend going more towards inbound, just knowing that there's so much search volume already established for your service. Every day people in mass amount of volume are searching for things like divorce lawyer near me and things like that. It's a little bit different for a stretch business, like I said, where people are saying, stretch company near me, right? It's a lot different in terms of search volume that exists. Yeah, it's not to say you don't want to obviously have a healthy split. You absolutely do. That's where a lot of times we'll flex outbound and inbound in terms of our audiences, right? So outbound, we may look at that for, in the stretch example, being more prospecting. So again, informing people about your solution, product, and business. Whereas in a more mature market or a business in their marketing strategy, we'll look at some of that outbound stuff as also a vehicle for re-engaging audiences that have already engaged with your brand, or maybe already clicked on a search ad and things like that, as well as obviously, like the stretch example, also prospecting and kind of letting people know who you're about in your markets.
Nice. So let's come back to kind of one of the topics that we keep coming back to is measurement. So how do we measure this? How do we think about this? What's the way that we execute that here so that we know if what we're doing is working, actually driving more revenue, and improving profits? How do we do that?
Yep. So, just like any other ad platform, you will get some of the vanity metrics, as we like to call them, right? You do want some of the directional stuff to tell you if things are working. So, good things to look at that from a creative perspective could be like click through rate, people actually engaging with the ads, things like that. In terms of measuring it as a successful channel, though, we want to always bring it back to the business metrics. So, we talk a lot about the waterfall reporting, why this is so critical to evaluate your kind of holistic marketing strategy. Because a lot of times, if you're looking at these as individual silos, let's say like specifically our OTT campaign that's on Hulu, right? You're probably going to end up turning that off. I'm just going to tell you, if you look at vanity metrics, if you have a robust, waterfall reporting system where you can really look at this stuff, what you can do is look at time periods when you have that active. Are you seeing improvements in some of the things that you would expect? So that could be, more leads coming in through different channels, right? It's a commercial. People are not clicking anything, right? They're watching it. We're disrupting their space. Ultimately, it's harder to draw direct attribution to those channels. But what is likely happening if you have a good targeting and creative strategy there is that you're having users now learn more about you, and they're going to come in either direct or organic, or potentially through other means, through your other ad platforms that you have out there. So it's really critical. A lot of times, working with our lawyer clients, we'll, kind of look at different time periods when we have it on and off, and that'll be our way to determine, like, is this really helping or not? And then use those vanity metrics to make optimizations and improvements where we can.
Yeah, another thing that we'll typically look at is what are the engagement metrics of those other channels and how have those improved? Because if we're doing a good job with messaging and offer, we should be seeing higher levels of engagement as well as seeing higher levels of like our intake rates from a qualification perspective. Our close rates should go up. Like all of the metrics in the waterfall should actually get healthier. But that's not actually going to be directly attributed to anything you're doing internally. They're more pre-sold because they're more aware of you. They've had more time to consider, get used to your brand. So now you're seeing this come through your waterfall. And then you shut it off and you're like, oh, my team isn't closing as well anymore. Or why is my call center not doing so well on setting appointments or whatever? Go back up that waterfall and you might find like, oh, there's a lot of things are suffering here. And we did this thing. Those are kind of the things that we will typically look at.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Any closing thoughts before we jump off? High level, what I heard you say is good, healthy mix, inbound versus outbound. A lot of it's going to be dictated by how mature your market is, kind of where you are in your maturity of your marketing overall. Anything else to think about before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. You know, what's best for both for most businesses, it's going to be a mix of everything. You know, depending on how far along you are in your marketing strategy. You know, I think a lot of the mistakes we see, especially in new clients coming over, is like a lot of times they'll be like, you know, oh, we tried paid search once, didn't work for us, so now we're just running this Facebook, website traffic campaign, and that's our main way of driving leads to our business. And a lot of times it's like, yeah, that could be an effective way to drive leads, but it's likely not the most effective method in your mix. There's probably, especially if you fall into one of these more mature markets, a lot of opportunity in search or potentially in these other outbound tactics to drive more awareness to both your solution and business. So I would say if you're a small business owner, kind of thinking through your marketing program, I would say the way to look at it is we'll probably have opportunities across the board. We don't want to be siloed in one specific channel, but certainly there is order and operation to make sure you're getting the most out of all of it.
Awesome. Appreciate it, James. Next time we get to see James, we are going to be talking offers. And this is one thing that we work with a lot of businesses on, because typically when we get involved with a business, we see one offer, and that's not a great place to be. So we're going to talk about that when we come back next time. Just appreciate it. Appreciate it, James. Talk to you later.
Yep. Looking forward to it.